Okay, welcome to video 3 of the CCT Data Center course. In this video we're going to be describing virtualization. Okay, so what is virtualization? I've got a couple of definitions here, the first long, the second one more short and succinct. So the process of creating a software-based or virtual representation of something, such as virtual applications, servers, storage, and networks. So the generic definition is a virtual representation of something physical, most likely server, computer components, stuff like that. In order to better understand virtualization, we kind of need to go back in time a little bit, probably 10 to 15 years ago. We're going to start on the left. Here we have one server with many applications. The way that we used to do it is we would have one server, like a Windows server or something, and then load as many apps onto that one server as possible. But then, if you start looking at the middle here, we started to see a trend where you would have applications that would have specific hardware requirements. And as a result, they would start to require their own physical server. So you would have one physical server per application for a lot of applications. So if you think about that, it quickly becomes physically impossible in the data center to accommodate that. And right as this was happening, virtualization technology was first developed by VMware, and it started to take off. So what virtualization technology allows you to do is have one physical server per application, as you see here on the right. You can see all the virtual machines in here. So what are the benefits of virtualization? The biggest one is going to be reduced cost. You're going to spend less on capital for the hardware, and it's going to be less operational expenses on the hardware as well. To illustrate this, let's go back to the previous slide just a little bit and explain for just 1 second. So if you look at this middle model where you're having each server with its own application, now each of these servers is going to have to be built to max possible hardware for that application. And the end result is going to be that each application is going to use much less than the max. So the actual utilization is going to be much lower, and you're going to have a bunch of unused resources. So then if you look at the model here on the right, here it allows you to more closely build your physical resources a lot closer to the actual utilization. And the end result of that is that you end up using a lot less overall resources. All right, so back to the benefits. Faster deployment. I can speak from experience that you can deploy servers much faster as a result of virtualization. I've seen things up to 20 times as fast. It's also a lot easier to back up your infrastructure. The VMware technologies, or whatever you're going to be using as your hypervisor, allows for automatic backups that were much easier than the old methods that you have to do in the data center. It also makes disaster recovery a lot easier, pretty much as a result of being able to spin up the machines a lot faster. In a DR scenario where you have to rebuild everything, you're going to be able to do it much quicker. All right, so here we have the different types of virtualization, and we're going to be going through each of these more in depth, but the three types of virtualization are server virtualization, storage virtualization, and network virtualization. All right, server virtualization is using software on a physical server to create multiple instances of virtual machines. And the piece of software that does that is called the hypervisor. As you can see here, our second one, the software that abstracts the physical hardware and presents it to the virtual machines. It controls and presents the physical resources to the virtual machines. So if you think about what the function that a Windows server used to have, is that it would be in charge of assigning the physical resources on a server to the applications that were running on it. In a sense, the hypervisor is performing that same role. There's two different types of hypervisors. One is a bare metal or tier 1 hypervisor, and this is installed directly on the physical server. So if you get the physical server, there's nothing else running on it, and then you can install the hypervisor like ESXi on there. And then there is an embedded or tier 2 hypervisor. This must run on an operating system that's pre-installed on the hardware like Windows or Linux. So then this brings us to our last two definitions here, which is host and virtual machine. And these two terms are mostly meant to give us another term to use for server, right? So server can mean like the physical box, the physical server. And then now when we have one physical server that contains multiple virtual servers, it's much easier to just have these different names it's much easier to have these different two terms than to just call everything server. So host is the physical server that runs an instance of a hypervisor. And then the virtual machine is the virtual server that is running inside the hypervisor. Okay, storage virtualization. The first type of storage virtualization is host-based storage virtualization. So this presents the virtual drives made up of physical storage to the guest machines at the host level. So the important distinction with this one is that the storage is located on that server and then being represented virtually to machines on that server, to VMs on that server. Array-based storage virtualization presents different types of storage arrays for different tiers. A master array handles I/O for all arrays. This allows for centralized management of distributed physical storage. And then network-based storage. The physical storage is represented as a virtual pool via the network. This is the most common form of storage virtualization. And then our last type of virtualization is network virtualization. So this is dividing up the physical network into logical overlay networks. It's becoming very common with all sorts of new networking technologies like SD-WAN, VXLAN. And it's used to give different groups of users within an organization different network functionality. Some user groups might be able to access other things, might be able to access things that others can't, and that sort of thing. So it allows you to, get the network to behave exactly as you want it to for different groups of users. All right, so that concludes the lesson on virtualization. If you found it helpful, give the video a like and subscribe. That way you won't miss the next video. See you in the next one.